CDC has extended the eviction moratorium until July. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have another great article for you today, and it's all about the eviction moratorium. But before I get into that article, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll keep working to bring you great articles about the eviction moratorium and other news that's of interest to landlords. So, this article comes to us from apnews.com, and it says, CDC extends eviction moratorium a month, says it's the last time. Now, I told you before in some of my other videos, I didn't believe for 1 second they were going to let the eviction moratorium end at the end of June. Not 1 second. Honestly, I don't believe they're going to let it end at the end of July, even though they're saying that they're not going to extend it anymore. But, people, they keep putting all this pressure on landlords. They really expect landlords to be the ones who have to sacrifice in order to make this whole thing work. And the more articles I read about landlords that are going bankrupt, the more articles I read about landlords who are losing their shirts trying to pay to keep tenants in their housing, the more I'm convinced that this thing has to end. And, it doesn't surprise me one bit that they extended it, but I still think that it's unlawful. It's not right. It's against the Constitution. But anyway, let's get into it. The Biden administration on Thursday extended the nationwide ban on evictions for a month to help millions of tenants unable to make rent payments during the coronavirus pandemic, but said this is the last time it plans to do so. Dr. Rochelle Walensky, director of the CDC, extended the eviction moratorium from June 30th until July 31st. The CDC said this is intended to be the final extension of the moratorium. Yeah, whatever. They said that the vaccination rates are up really, really high all across the country. The number of people who are infected and dying has just dropped down enormously. Really, there's no reason for the CDC to keep this eviction moratorium going. And even extending it another month is only punishing the landlords who are struggling during this time. By the end of March, 6.4 million American households were behind on their rent, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. As of June 7th, roughly 3.2 million people in the U.S. said they faced eviction in the next 2 months, according to the U.S. Census Bureau's Household Pulse survey. The news brought a sense of relief to tenants on the verge of being evicted and whose only lifeline was the CDC moratorium. Yeah, well, you know what my problem with that statistic is? What is the average number of people who are facing eviction in a normal month when there isn't a pandemic? Is this higher than normal? If it is higher than normal, were these the same people who would have been evicted for non-payment beforehand, and the only reason they're able to stay in these houses is because of the eviction moratorium? Because that's not actually helping anything, okay? These same people who have money trouble in the past, they're having money trouble right now. And it's all, expected. The landlord is expected to be these rich boogeymen up here somewhere with big piles, money bins, full of gold, and we're all expected just to pay for it. Okay? It's not right. Among them was, I'm not even going to read this article about, hard luck article about a tenant. They always throw these little stories, to make you help empathize with the plight of the tenants in there. Unfortunately, they don't have any stories in here about the landlords, and that's why I have this channel, just to bring you the stories that aren't being told in the mainstream media. The extension announcement Thursday was accompanied by a flurry of administration activity. The Treasury Department issued new guidance encouraging states and local governments to streamline distribution of the nearly $47 billion in emergency rental assistance funding. An Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta released an open letter to state courts around the country encouraging them to pursue a number of alternatives that would protect both tenants and landlords. Gupta's letter states that eviction filings are expected to overwhelm courts across the country unless additional steps are taken. Yeah, no duh. Okay, evictions are going to happen regardless of whether the moratorium ends right now or rental assistance gets to as many people as possible or not, okay? Some of these tenants just need to be evicted, and that's just the way it is. Some of them have been cheating the system and trying to screw landlords over for over a year now, and it's time for them to go. And this whole thing, about getting the rental assistance, streamlining the distribution of the money, that is something that the states should have been working on from the get-go, because they are really, really behind in terms of the number of people who've applied for rental assistance, and the number of people who've actually received it is very, very small. And that's just not the way the program should have been set up. You know, they should have gotten that money to the landlords in need as quickly as possible, and instead they're making them jump through all these hoops. And the hoops and everything have meant that, guess what? The money still hasn't been distributed. The White House had acknowledged Wednesday that the emergency pandemic protection, which had been extended before, would have to end at some point. The trick is devising the right sort of off-ramp to make the transition without major social upheaval. Gupta's letter to state courts encourages them to do everything possible to prevent or delay evictions. Losing one's home can have catastrophic economic and psychological effects, she states. The entire legal community, including the Department of Justice, the bar, and the judiciary, has an obligation to do what it can to ensure that each and every individual has meaningful and equal access to justice before facing such consequences. Well, don't forget about the justice that the landlords deserve for the tenants who have been cheating them out of rent and staying in their houses, their units, their properties for free for over a year. Okay, there needs to be justice for those landlords as well. And without them acknowledging that in this article, it just makes me mad. It just angers me. That includes giving tenants as much time as possible and making sure tenants and landlords are aware of any emergency relief funds that may be available. She references steps made by state courts in Texas, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and directs state courts to an online assessment tool designed by the National Center for State Courts to help jurisdictions determine the most appropriate model. This week, dozens of members of Congress wrote to President Joe Biden and Walensky calling for the moratorium to be not only extended, but also strengthened in some ways. Yeah, that's not a surprise either. Politicians, once again, pandering to the tenants, which obviously are going to outnumber the number of landlords out there. And at the meantime, they're stripping people of their property rights, okay? Don't they realize that the property rights are one of the things that are guaranteed to us within the Constitution? And that's just not the way that we need to go about doing things, okay? Ending the assistance too abruptly, they said, would disproportionately hurt some of the minority communities that were hit so hard by the virus, which has killed more than 600,000 people in the United States. They also echoed many housing advocates by calling the moratorium's protections to be made automatic, requiring no special steps from the tenant to gain its protections. Yeah, well, here's the problem with that. That is going to lead to a ton of abuse. Okay, instead of making the moratorium's protections automatic, they should make it automatic when a landlord applies for the rental assistance, they automatically get paid. How about that? But I don't see any talks of any concern about the landlord and their financial situation in this. Instead, we're talking about tenants, and you and I both know there are a ton of tenants out there who are abusing this and that will abuse this if this passes. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good article about the eviction moratorium, but I'm not optimistic. I'm not optimistic that they're going to just allow it to end at the end of July. I hope they do. Actually, I hope that the Supreme Court overturns it before the end of July, but whatever it takes to get this thing to end, okay? As landlords, we deserve better than the way we've been treated.